Hello, everyone. This is Tammy, Texas Desert Rose here, and so good to be on here again. Thank you for joining us and, of course, sharing for anybody who might benefit. I have a wonderful guest today, Ms. Dawn, who I've known for quite some time. We haven't talked in a while, but I've known Dawn for since I was pregnant with my son, 1999.
It's been
Wow.
like 27 years. Like, yeah,
27. Oh my
26, 27 years. Yeah.
And, Dawn is quite an inspiration to those who know her. And she is agreed graciously to come on and share her story. So, hello and welcome, Dawn. Thank you for trusting me here.
I'm kind of excited about this. I'm excited to finally put my story out and help others. And just, maybe something I say will click with someone else and help them know that wherever they are is not where they have to stay, and whatever they're going through is not permanent. So,
Well, you'd certainly be a good example of that. Let me share a little bit that Dawn and I worked. Again, I was pregnant with my son, and today's my daughter's birthday. She turns 30 today. That blows my mind. Anyway, I was working as a counselor at North Central Texas College when I first started. And Don, weren't you a student assistant?
yeah, it was a work study.
That's it. Work study. That's it. So, and I was automatically drawn to Dawn because she and I had been through some tough times, and that tends to resonate. And I believe, and again, if you'd rather not talk about this, I absolutely respect and support that. But I think you had lost your son by then, had you not?
No, not by then. No.
Oh,
At that
yeah.
time, I was actually going through all the things with his father.
Yes, that's what you and I would talk about.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So you start where you like and feel free to take it as you need, and I'll ask questions as needed.
It's there's so much from such a early age. I don't even know where to start. So I thought that might be kind of lay the groundwork for how I ended up where I was and how I decided and felt the urge to get where I am. So when I was a young girl, like 4 years old, my mom was a young mom. She had me when she was 16. So that kind of set the stage for there to be some generational things. And so
Meaning repeats.
repeats, yeah, learned behaviors, not knowing better, because if you don't know better, you can't do better. And so
Yes.
at 4 years old, I remember my mom started dating a man who quickly became very abusive in all the ways. She was young, she was 19, 20 years old, and um, he was 11 years older than her.
Okay,
And
so about 30.
he was, yeah, much older. And so he was mentally, physically, sexually, and emotionally abusive to both her and I, and very much brainwashing. And so that form of abuse started whenever I was 4 years old. And they were married until I was probably 15, I want to say. So,
Wow.
yeah, so for a long time, I was in the home where that was acceptable. And it wasn't until junior high that I remember saying something about your parents beating you, like your dad beating you. And the friends I was eating lunch with go, "What? That's not normal." And I'm like, "Oh, your parents don't beat you?" I thought that that was normal. And so it opened me up to start talking about other things like, well, wait a minute, does your dad do this to you? And they were like, no way. And so, of course, people told, and there was, I got questioned a lot. Um, the authorities were called and told, and cases were open, and nothing ever came of it. And so,
How did you feel at the time? Just trying to get an idea of how it felt at that age with your friends going, what?
I was shocked. I thought everybody went through it. I thought it was normal. I thought my home was no different than any other home. I thought, if you did something wrong and you were literally hit with a shovel, I thought that was normal. I thought, oh, well, parents get angry. This is what they do. I thought that if you were, punished by just different methods, standing up against the wall with your arms straight out and not able to move at all, I thought for hours, I thought that was normal. Um, I didn't know that those things were not normal. I didn't know that it wasn't normal for your mom not to be able to say anything, because if she said something, she was going to be beat as well. And, there were many times that that did happen. But, at the time, I didn't understand. I wasn't a mother. I wasn't, I didn't have
You're
the
just trying to
wisdom.
figure out the rules. Like,
Correct.
what
And
are
when
the
they
standards?
applied,
This is my normal, but apparently it's not normal. So,
right, trying to figure out the rules. And when they applied, when is this rule the right one? When can I say this and when can I not? Because the rules today were not the rules tomorrow. And so,
the rule was
when
there
I
were no
started
rules.
talking, yeah, when I started talking to friends and they weren't experiencing those things, wait a minute, what do you mean? And so I remember feeling like something was off. And then, we didn't have phones,
True.
cell phones. We didn't have internet. We didn't have all these things that connected us where you could do this research. We had encyclopedias and dictionaries. That was it. And so
Yeah. Wow.
there wasn't these connections where you could just find out. It was just what other people told you. And so I remember these four girls sitting at the lunch table, and all of them are going, their eyes are so wide. And I can imagine now being a 13-year-old girl and somebody saying that to me, I would probably go, holy moly, what did they just say? Because I basically just dumped all this stuff on them and they had no idea. And
And
it
it
wasn't
kind of
normal
left
for
you
them.
feeling kind of out there on your own too, I would imagine.
Yeah, yeah. On my own, but at the same time, like, oh, they're supporting me, like they care,
Good.
you know? And so it opened me up to telling some people in my family. And then it became known, and I was able to talk to more people. It didn't stop until we left. Um, and we didn't leave until, like I said, I was 15. And it
Well, I
wasn't
was
even
seeing
then
a
that,
pattern because there was 11 years difference between him and your mom, and then 11, they stayed together for 11 years.
hmm well, and it wasn't even that we left. It was a kind of a weird situation. She stayed on the same property and split our land. So he ended up living across the driveway from us. So it was still not even a separation really. And
Trauma, are we
mhm,
traumatization? Because I don't know what the official term is, but wow.
yeah. So it took another year or two before we actually moved into a house that was away from there. And at that point, my mom was a raging alcoholic. That
Yeah.
was how she dealt with the split, was she became a raging alcoholic. And so, which was a pattern in our family, because her mother was an alcoholic and actually died while she was pregnant with me. While my mother was pregnant with me, my grandmother was killed from walking down a highway drunk.
Uh,
And
her
so
mom.
my grandfather was an alcoholic, and it was the norm. That was the norm in our family. And then, the stepfather was alcoholic and drug addict. So this was normal. And it wasn't
Yeah.
until, gosh, it took years before I realized, I probably was in my 30s before I realized that wasn't normal. And so we left, got our own house finally, and dealing with my mom, I think for a long time in my childhood, way before this, I was more of the adult than I was the child, because there was so many responsibilities. You
Like,
have to take on those responsibilities, with my mom being so young when she had me, and then falling into this pattern, which was the same pattern that she came from. So falling into this pattern, um, you know, I, of course, I was a latchkey kid. That was pretty normal back whenever I was in school. And it was always, and I was an only child. So there was a lot more responsibility than typical for kids, these days. So once we left, it didn't really, the beating stopped, but it didn't really get better because then I've got an angry alcoholic mother who was not a nice drunk at all. And
Oh,
that
her anger
continued
was
for,
coming out.
it was because she never dealt with it, and so that continued for years. And then, I guess, it seems like years. I say years. It wasn't as long as I think it was probably a couple of years, but it seems like an eternity when you're in it.
Oh,
And the struggle, I was working to help, and I'm an only child, so I've got a mom who can't make it completely on her own, so I'm having to help.
right.
Um, just so many different things of the struggle of growing up, and then going out into the world and starting to date myself. I found myself looking for, not really understanding, but looking for the same type of man, and if I would date someone who was nice, it was like, oh, he's too nice. He's too nice. He doesn't, he's always saying nice things, and that's just weird.
Questioning everyone. You didn't feel
Yes.
like you could trust anybody. No surprise.
No, no. And that was not the type of man I was used to. So why would I date that kind of man?
So you consciously would look for somebody who wasn't too nice because if you're too nice, then it's questionable.
Yep.
Okay.
And then I met my husband, my first husband,
Hmm.
and had my two children with him. And he was a carbon copy, abusive. He was not sexually abusive to my children. He was sexually abusive to me. He was emotionally and physically abusive to me. And I always thought it was my fault. It was always my fault because that's what he said. You know, um, if he did something or cheated or was mean, well, if you didn't do whatever it was that he decided that day that I didn't need to do, then he wouldn't have been that way. And so I spent that time frame. I married him. Well, we got together when I was 18, and I left in 2008. So from 97 to 2008. So again, 11 years that I stayed. And I had two boys at that time. And I just remember, there were times whenever I would look and go, he used to say things to me like, I hope on your way to work you get hit by a semi, your boys will be better off. And I remember pulling out to the highway one day going, which of these semis will hit me and my boys won't have to watch me suffer? And, I don't know what made me not do it, but I just remember
You
I
mean
woke
you
up.
were being intentional, you were going to make it happen because you believe what
Absolutely.
he's saying.
Absolutely. I mean, he had me so completely brainwashed to believing
Absolutely.
all
And to
these
anybody
things.
listening, it's easy to do when you're already in that place and from the age of 4 that you know of, from the age of 4, growing up with those messages and that behavior, a child is egocentric. They're automatically going to blame themselves. And so those messages continue until you get the help that you need. They continue. And so whenever first husband would say these things, you didn't know to question them. Kind of like when you were telling your friends at school, and they're going, "What?" And you're like, "Wait, that's not normal." You didn't question then until you knew to question. Same thing here. Even
Correct.
as
Well, and a
adults.
stepdad, from a very young age, you're so stupid. You're only book smart. You're absolutely retarded. Nobody's ever going to love you. You're going to be a horrible wife. I remember my mom got a job when I was 9 years old that worked evenings. And so I had to start helping make dinner, which meant mostly making dinner. And I
Mhm.
remember one time there was, I think back now, and this is silly, but there was pork chops, and I needed some, I think, mashed potatoes and a vegetable. I don't know. But at 9 years old, I'm making pork chops. And I remember I cooked these pork chops, and he spit it out and he goes, "This isn't fit for a dog." And so I just remember that stuck in my head for the longest time. And so fast forward again to when I got married, and my husband he would always tell me, nobody else is ever going to love you. You leave me, nobody else is going to ever have you. Nobody's going to want you. Look how you treat me. It's awful. And so I'm hearing the same thing on repeat. So it must be true. If my stepfather, who was supposed to be my father, and now let me add, my biological father released rights to me before I was born. So not having anything to do with him and thinking, if my father didn't want me before I was born, then how is any other man going to love me? I've already got the two men, my stepfather and my now husband, who are telling me nobody else is going to want me. And my father released rights to me. Why would anybody ever love me?
Wow.
And so I remember just thinking that, and I would pour into my boys because I did not want them to ever feel like nobody would love them.
I
And
remember when I first met you, you talking about your boys. It was just like almost like coveting them because you were, I'm putting words in your mouth, correct me, but you were so afraid something was going to happen to them.
oh yeah, oh yeah. From the time my oldest son was born, I had this fear that something bad was going to happen. Um, but I just remember I woke up one day, my ex-husband now, um, there had been an event where I really thought he was going to kill me. And I woke up that next day and I just said, people had told me for years, when you're ready, you'll leave. You'll know it's time to leave because you won't cry about it anymore. You will be you will be so over it that things that used to attract you will no longer attract you. And I remember he would walk in the room and I couldn't stand the smell of him. I couldn't
Mhm.
stand the sight of him. I couldn't stand his voice for no reason. I couldn't stand his voice. Just everything about him that used to attract me was now repulsive. And I remember I woke up that morning after such a crazy time the day before. And I looked at him and I said, I'm done. I don't want to be with you anymore. And well, he said, well, what do you mean you're done? And I said, I'm done. And we had done the back and forth. It had been for the whole time. I don't want to be with
You
you. So
felt
he would leave.
safe in saying, I'm done.
Hmm. Yeah. He was never one of those people that got violent whenever I said I didn't want to be with him.
Okay.
His violence was more, he was a drug addict
Okay.
and he was a habitual cheater, and his um abuse and violence was more surrounded around when he was cheating
Mm-hmm.
and when he was using drugs. So it wasn't constant that he was using hard drugs. He always smoked marijuana, but it was not constant that he was using hard drugs. When he would use the hard drugs, he would get violent. And it would be whatever type of violence, whether it be sexual violence, emotional violence, physical violence, whatever it was, he was. And so after, an event, he always was super nice. First it was my fault, and then it was like, what can I don't want to lose you. I don't want to, him
Mm-hmm.
backpedaling as they do.
Violent cycle. Yeah.
And so that day I remember telling him, I don't want to be with you anymore. And he always made me pay in some form for him to leave. So it didn't matter if I rented him a hotel room, gave him gas money, whatever it was, he was going to take the last bit of money he possibly could. So I already had it figured out. I said, I'll either rent you an apartment and pay for 3 months, or I'll buy you a camper and move you to a lot and let you stay there. So he chose the camper because he thought it was going to be like every time before and we were going to get back together. So I remember that I got him a camper and I moved him close to his work so that he could go to work. And
You did all
I
the stuff.
I had it all planned out, and I would be lying if I said that I didn't have a few moments where I was thinking, "Oh, I'm going to go back." But and that was because my son, my oldest son, he would say, "Mama, Daddy loves you. Daddy wants to be with you. You got to forgive him. You got to give him another chance. Mama, Daddy." And I didn't ever tell the kids what their dad was doing because that I always felt like the worst thing to do is to talk bad about the other parent to my children, because they will eventually see it. I didn't want to be the parent that put in their head, whatever. And I didn't want them to know. It was embarrassing. I didn't want them to know everything I was going through. It was not their business that their dad was cheating. It was not their business. It was not, it was adult business. It wasn't kid business.
And as a result, and that is the right thing, Dawn. As a result, I would imagine that it ended up with you looking like the bad guy.
For a bit, for a bit, but that was pretty short lived. My boys, when I left, the boys were 9 and 7.
Okay.
So they learned really quickly because for their dad, it was out of sight, out of mind. So he didn't come see them. He didn't have anything to do with them. The couple of times that he did, it was very much on his terms. And so
And it benefited him.
the oldest one saw that pretty quickly
Yeah,
and didn't like it.
yeah.
And so we spent, we ended up moving and we spent quite a bit of time, like I said, we didn't talk about dad. And I started dating someone else. I went to a lot of therapy after their dad and I split. In fact, about 6 months before, I knew it was coming. I could feel that it was coming. I just needed for the timing to be right. So about 6 months before, I found a Christian counselor. I put my boys in counseling. I went to the doctor. I said, I know I'm going to need some anxiety medication because I'm going to need something to make me not care, basically, is what I'd said. I
You
needed
definitely
to
were
make,
preparing. You've been
yes,
always
I was.
been a planner and a preparer, but that doesn't come by accident.
No. So I went to my doctor. I told her, I said, I'm going to leave my husband, but I need anxiety meds. I know I do. And
Mhm.
so she gave me anxiety meds. And then he, as a last ditch effort, decided that he wanted us to go to counseling, which was so funny because I'd asked for years, let's do anything. I don't want to be a statistic. I don't want our boys to be without both parents. I want to make this work. I mean, I would beg and beg and beg, and it never was good enough. And so this time he decided we needed to go to counseling. And so he found a counselor. And when we went to the counselor, I let him say everything he needed to say. I remember sitting there on the couch, and it happened to be in the same office where the boys were going, but one of the different therapists.
Mhm.
And I was sitting there, and she is asking, all the questions, and he's giving his side. She doesn't want to have sex as often as I do, and she doesn't cook for me all the time like I want her to. And, I'm working nights and he's working days. And so I'm getting the kids ready for school and getting them on the bus, and then I'm sleeping while they're at school, and then I'm taking them to myself. I'm taking them to all of their sports practices and doing all the things. He goes to work and comes home and smokes weed. That was it. And so he's
Well, and
telling the
you can
counselor,
tell that there's definitely, and I'm saying this because there's going to be people from all over that watch this. And the idea, kind of like the country Texas way, not just Texas, but is the woman does it all
yeah. And
when
that's
it
how it
comes to the
was.
home, regardless of how many jobs and all that, but they do it all.
Yep, that's how it was. I mean, I did it all. Mowed the yard. If the car needed fixed, I figured it out or took it to where it needed to get fixed. He didn't do anything.
Mhm.
He would go watch movies with his friends at their house or whatever. And so I remember sitting there on that couch and the counselor, the therapist, asking him all the questions. What is it that you think we need to be seen for today? And she doesn't have sex with me, and she doesn't cook, all the like she used to, and she doesn't, which I did. And she doesn't. She's never home. She's always on the run, and she's always, she doesn't understand. She yells and she's
She
complaining and
doesn't,
she
she doesn't,
gripes.
she doesn't.
And so when she looked at me, she said, "What do you have to say?" And I said, "There's nothing to salvage." And she said, "Why do you feel that way?" And I said, "Well, I know of 12 women that he's been with. He continues to use drugs. He's physically abusive. He's emotionally abusive. And I hear this phrase every single day." And she just looked at me and her mouth dropped. She goes, "Well, I think we need to do some individual counseling." And she looked at him and she said, "And until you've lived on your own for a year, without having other women involved, I don't think there's anything to work on between the two of you. And so I remember leaving there and getting in my car and going, finally, somebody gets it. And
Time ever.
I stayed in that office for therapy for the next year. And at first I was going twice a week. And, of course, then I was able to get good enough that I could go down to once a week. And she did, and I don't know what it's called. You'll know what this is, where she goes through the different people in your family, like what is a dad, what is a mom, and you give them what your idea is of that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
It's eye-opening, isn't it?
it is, because my idea of what a mom was for me to my children was totally different than what a mom was to me, like for me specifically. And my idea of what a dad was, I don't even know that it met any definition of a dad. And it was so clear when I started thinking about men I had dated, why I had dated those men, and why I was attracted to them and I latched onto them.
The connection.
And yes. And I just remember going, never again.
So in the therapy world, for those of you listening, it's called a trauma bond. And we don't realize, we don't know the therapy terms, right? But it's literally like this. I don't know, Don, if you would describe it this way, but it's almost like it's an attachment, but it's addictive. Like I have to have it. So it's like the little child who's literally being left behind whenever they would leave or cheat.
When things got calm, then I had anxiety, because when is something going to happen? What is going to happen? Something bad is brewing, but I don't know what it is, because that's how it's always been. It was literally the calm before the storm. There was always chaos. And if there wasn't chaos,
It was
then
unstable because you didn't know when it was coming. It's almost
right.
like there was safety in the chaos because then you didn't have to wonder. I know that doesn't make sense, but that's exactly how it works.
It makes sense to anybody who's dealing with it or has dealt with it.
Yes, yes.
And anybody who hasn't dealt with that, oh, what beauty that is.
Yeah, you're right.
So when we moved, 3 months after moving is when my son passed. He was 12. And he died by drowning. And so then I'm now charting new territories, because I have a 10-year-old that up until this point, I didn't realize that my 12-year-old was always helping make. I knew that my youngest child had a hard time understanding things. He had some learning disabilities. I knew that. I didn't realize the magnitude of them until the oldest child, who had been helping him understand, was gone. And so it was a huge, huge pivotal moment in our lives of learning. Luckily I was past the point. So we were 3 years out from bio dad being gone. So, my ex-husband was gone for 3 years at this point almost. So we had adjusted to our normal, but it was a new normal for the boys and I, for my son and I, to deal with. But one of the things that really, really drove home to me that I did the right thing by not talking to them about what their dad was doing and being how he was, and not talking down about him. 2 weeks before my son passed away, we were going to get some food, and we pull up to the little drive-thru and we're waiting for our food. And he says, "Mama, you got to tell me, why did you let Daddy do all the things he did to you?" And I said, you're not old enough for me to talk to you about this. Now he's 12, but he was always wise beyond his years. And I
He was
said, you're
trying to
not,
make sense of it.
And I said, you're not old enough for me to talk to you about this. He goes, yes, I am. And he got pretty angry. And he said, I know, I know that my daddy was cheating on you. And I know that daddy hit you. And I know that daddy was mean to you. And daddy said ugly things to you. And he said, and it wasn't fair. And you didn't deserve that. And the best thing you ever did was leave our dad. And to hear that from him, because this is the one who was crying, screaming, chasing me down the road. Mama, please go get daddy. Please bring him back. Please let him come back. Daddy loves you. Daddy just wants to be better. He's just sick. He made so many excuses for him. But in that short 3 years, which
Powerful.
seems like forever,
Not so
but in that
much.
short 3 years, he understood what it took me 30 to understand.
Very wise.
And so, I continued to not talk. Whenever he passed away, my ex-husband, we did finally get a hold of him. He did show up to the funeral, and he had made a comment that was really, really, really ugly. And we've not heard from him since. So that's been 14 years. And so my youngest son has not, he's had one or two times where his father's tried to reach out, but he just has no interest. He lets him know, like, I'm not interested. And it's not because I've ever, told him anything. Now, when he got older, he is 24 now, and he's asked me, and I will talk to him about things on his level at this point, because I do believe he's old enough to know. And I feel like sometimes it being that he lived in that, I think that it helps him to know so that he doesn't repeat those patterns without trying to. Whether it be he be angry or he ends up with a woman who's angry.
Right.
So it's been quite a journey. And there's so many things in my story that I feel like I could pick apart and tell so much more about. So
Yeah. That's a that's a rough one. Rough, rough, rough. So, not to skip into the roses, because there's definitely been a lot of thorns and there's a whole lot more. But to kind of get a glimpse, give a glimpse to those listening. Can you give, I mean, I'm sure there's more that you would like to share, and it's okay if you don't, but how did you get through those years? What's a little bit of a silver lining?
I honestly don't know how I got through the years. I really don't. You know, the only thing that I ever think back to is God. When I was 4 years old,
That's a
a
big one.
church bus would go by our house. And I remember seeing that bus every Sunday. And I got up one morning and I got dressed. And I said, Mom, I want to go on that bus. And so she put me on that church bus and I started going to church. And the church was across the highway from where we lived. And I remember walking into this big old church, and the the older people in the church just kind of looked at, because here I am, this little 4-year-old girl by myself, right? And
Right.
so I remember sitting, and I don't know who they were, but I sat next to an older woman, and she reminded me of an old grandma. And I remember I sat by her and she just had her arm around me, and we sang and we, did the church thing, right? And I was 4 years old, and I had no idea that it was boring or that it because they were singing and doing all the things. And so every Sunday I started going to the church. And
That wasn't an
later,
accident. I bet you don't believe that either.
what's that?
That wasn't an accident.
Not at all. Not at all. It's what's even more interesting is because the guy who drove the church bus knew my stepfather. Of course, I don't think anybody knew that he was the man he was.
Correct.
But they knew him. And so a lot of people at this church knew my stepfather, even though he didn't go to this church. And then when we moved, so we moved when I was 9 years old, we moved to out from where we were living in town. We moved to the country. And I remember walking around out in the country, and I went down this irrigation ditch, and it was forever. It was forever. And I stumbled upon a church. And so I started going to that church every Sunday. And I went there for vacation Bible school. And, anytime I could, I went to that church. And I believe that my foundation in the church is what got me through when I was a kid and as I was older.
Children
And
at that age, you know more than adults do as far as what you need.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, when I say no, I don't mean up here. Like there's the spiritual, the connection, the intuition. If I'm having a bad day at work and I work with children, I there's no way they could know, but they know.
yeah.
That's when I get the most hugs.
Kids are so intuitive.
Very.
And I don't think that, just like my son telling me that he knew,
Yeah.
they know things, they see things that we don't see because they're so pure. They haven't, they haven't gone through all the dirty things and their minds have not
Needed.
been tarnished yet. They're just a pure slate. So they know so much. And I truly believe that my foundation in the church got me through for years.
So, do you mind, what would you say is the negative as well as the positive effects today of what you've been through? Like, do the negative first, not to throw you off.
Yeah, no.
Right.
The negative effects, you never, ever get completely rid of trauma responses. You learn what they are, you learn what triggers you sometimes, but you never get rid of that.
In other words,
So,
you're never impervious to all of it. There's
no,
always going to
your
be
body
a
keeps the
trigger.
score no matter what. And
Well,
so we can tell ourselves, I don't live there anymore, but your body still knows.
it does.
And, so one of the things, my husband and I are not alcoholics by any means. But in fact, I don't think I've had a drink in probably 2 years. But when I go to bed, because I was a victim for child sexual assault and my stepfather was an alcoholic, I cannot go to sleep next to a man who's been drinking. It,
Smell.
the smell, I can go out, I can go to a nightclub. It doesn't bother me. But if I lay down in bed, I just cannot get comfortable if I smell that smell.
Well, it's a whole new level of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
You're
It
not going to
is.
believe it because sleep is the most vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, and that's when he would mess with me the most. So,
Yeah.
it's a trigger.
Couldn't be vulnerable. You
And
could
I
not.
know I'm safe. I know that I'm safe. My mind knows that I'm safe, but my body doesn't know that it's safe. Um, I don't like to be touched when I'm sleeping for that same reason.
Sure.
It's not because somebody's harming me, but it's that this is how it was, and I know. Um, One of the things, growing up, we lived. My stepfather was of the belief that he should make all the money, and he and my mother both worked, and they should both make their money, and it should still be left over at the end of the week to do what they want to do. So that means you get whatever services you can get. Whatever assistance you can get, you get it. If that means going to the church to get food, well, you go to the church and get food. And I'm not prideful, but I would have to be almost homeless before I will find a way. I'm very adamant that I will find a way. Those things, I feel like that's my asking for help, my ability to ask for help because of watching some of the things that he did.
Right.
It's really hard for me to ask for help. And it's not just with food or not just, you know, my freezers stay full probably because of that. But
Absolutely. I stock up on toilet paper.
yeah, it's like there's things that you're like, I'm not going to be without this.
Mhm.
And so, like, I remember my kids always laugh at me. I tell them I won't be without food and I won't be without AC because I remember we went through several summers without AC. And I remember laying on the bed, spraying a water bottle into the fan so that it would blow on me and I would get a few seconds of cool. But it was so hot. Likewise, it was also very cold if we ran out of propane because there were lots of times we didn't have the money for, propane. And so we would run out of propane and it was super cold. So
Yeah, a little
anyway,
known fact about Texas, we get pretty frigid cold.
yes. And so those things I believe are the negatives. I also, when I've got this thing where I always want to help. So I find myself trying to help people. And sometimes you just need to leave well enough alone because there's some people that you can't help. Like they're not in a place where they want to be helped.
Not until
And
they're
so that's one of the things I find myself sometimes doing. So
okay.
those are some of the negative things I think.
Do you find that it is, I know for a while there that was true, but excuse me. Do you find that it's sometimes hard to just allow yourself to be enjoy,
Yes.
calm?
When I'm at home, no. When I'm at home, it's my safe place. And I know that's my safe now. It's my safe place now for the last, well, since I got rid of the ex-husband. So since 2008, it's been my safe place.
I like that. You're able to create something that you've never had before.
Right.
So, what about some beautiful things that you have had that you still have today, you think, as a result of the stuff? And I know we've barely tiptoed into it,
Yeah.
but
The
um,
number one beautiful thing I have is my son. My son, because had I not, I may have had children. It wouldn't have been the same children. And I wouldn't trade him for the world.
of course not.
And then, because I went through what I went through, and then I sought after the therapy that I needed, I was able to um, meet my husband, who is the total opposite of all the things that I'd ever had. Very much the typical Texas cowboy, open the doors, calls me darling, just
No.
all the things that you think about, but you think, oh, that's not real. But it is. And would never, ever even consider for a moment putting a hand on me in violence. And it's
And
just
enjoys your
so,
strength.
yes. And it's just so different. I mean, in fact, for all of my life, I had multiple jobs. And when he and I got together, after my son passed, I was able to stay home and didn't work for 7.5 years. And it was, of course, I was not ever completely just at home, not working. I had a side business and that kind of thing. But the fact that I was able to give that time to my son when he needed it, and it wasn't expected that I was pulling in equal or whatnot. Um, he always said, "No, your contribution is you do so much already for all of us, and he needs you." And it just was so different. And I feel like had I not been where I was, I would not recognize the beauty in where I am.
Did you find on that because he treated you as you deserve so well that you were able to lay back and be vulnerable and receive,
Yes.
at least from him.
Yes. Yeah, it's my safe place. It's very much a safe place. It's very much allows me to not have to be on guard all the time because he's got my back. So if somebody does something, I know that he's going to have my back.
Whether you're around or you're not.
Correct.
That was my definition for somebody I could trust is they have my back regardless if I'm there or not.
Absolutely.
And I
Yeah.
think my biggest um, battle was allowing that. And when I ceased to question, I knew they were in. And that's
Yeah.
a very short list. It's a very
Yeah,
short.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So it just is so much. But there's so much beauty in life after the trauma and after you recognize that it is trauma, because I think that's part of it, is recognizing that what you're in is trauma, recognizing the abuse. It's so hard when I, one instance, my ex-husband, I remember standing at the stove and I'm cooking and he gets a hot dog out of the refrigerator. And I remember was, we laugh about this now. It's not funny. We laugh about the situation. Um, but he got a hot dog out of the fridge and I was cooking dinner and I wasn't cooking dinner fast enough. And he hit me with the hot dog in my face. And, the kids were standing there and they thought it was funny. And I remember how angry I got. And I was trying to hide that because I didn't want the kids to know I was so angry.
That was like a blind side, and let's see how you react. That's not just poking the bear.
Exactly. Exactly. And I just remember being so angry. And I can laugh about it now, like, who hit somebody with a hot dog, But at the same time, that's not okay.
Well, it's not loving actions,
No, no.
and it also, thank goodness this did not take hold, and maybe it did for a little while, but it also demonstrated to your sons that you didn't matter.
Yes.
Uh, just
That
because he
was a
didn't
huge
slap
thing.
you didn't mean it wasn't
Well,
disrespectful.
and so, along with that, and I consider this abusive as well. As a parent, you should have equal rights to discipline your children.
Yeah.
And I remember when they were younger, if I would discipline them, he would reward them. Why are you disciplining them? They didn't do anything wrong. They're just boys. No.
Systematically cutting you off at the knees.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm sure a few of you out there listening might be able to relate to that. So, Dawn, not that everything's perfect, life never is, but where would you put your life today? How would you assess it? Let's say 0 to 10, 10 being off the charts amazing.
It's definitely a 10. Definitely. I
That's
mean, everybody is, it doesn't matter where you are, you're going to have days that are a 0. But it's how many of those 0 days are you having in a span of time? And I can't tell you the last 0 day I had. It's definitely
amazing.
a 10. And honestly, I just look at my life, and every time something happens, sometimes things happen and they make you upset, and I say, you know what? God was preparing me for something better.
Well, that and it just proves that you're alive. We call it Earth School for a reason.
Absolutely. So no, my life is
Ultimately,
great.
you can close your eyes, you can be able to sleep soundly, and you know you're safe.
Yes.
You can't really put a number on that.
No. No, there's not a dollar amount. There's not any kind of grade I can put on being able to come home and feel secure and know that it's all going to work out.
It's really beautiful. I know I asked you this before. I think I did, but I don't remember the answer. Someone's out there listening and they have no idea They don't know what they're going to do. They're in a similar situation. Any suggestions at all of what
Yes,
they could do?
absolutely. There are so many resources. There are always resources close that will help, whether it be therapy. There are ways to get therapy at free or reduced costs. There are so many places to help you with your children, whether it's you need help with childcare or whatever the case may be. There are programs in place to help with that. There, there's so many resources. And
So,
unfortunately, so many people who are in that situation, a lot of times are kept pushed down to where they don't know what those resources are.
I
Um,
remember you were so resourceful.
yes,
Like you were constantly finding stuff for the single
yes,
parent that,
yes, yes, because I just remember, there's so many resources, things that you wouldn't think that people will help with, they will help with. And
yeah,
the first thing is I feel like you've got to make preparations, like you've got to prepare yourself for that space. So if it's that you don't currently work, find something you can do, whether it's a at-home business, it's a work from home business because you have children that you don't know, whatever it is, find something.
right.
If it's that you manage the money and he goes to work, I don't want to tell anybody to start pension money, but that's what I would have done. I mean,
Putting money
I would
back
have
even $1 at a time.
absolutely. When you go buy groceries, one less bag of chips. I mean, whatever it is, start preparing and get a plan in place.
Get in it for the long haul. You may not have the
Because your
money now.
children will thank you. You're not helping your children by staying. You're not. And because the headspace I was in, like I said, I was looking at the semis going, which ones will hit me that I won't be here, and what I would have missed had I gone.
Yeah.
And my boys deserved more than that. And the mental space I was in, and I remember when I left, I told my mom, I said, if that was happy, I don't ever want to be happy again. If what I was living through was happy, I'll spend the rest of my life being unhappy because I don't ever want to deal with that again. Because it dang sure wasn't any of the fairy tales that we've read in school.
Yeah, that's a whole different story. Well, I would say a 10 out of 10 is pretty happy. I'll take the happy today. So,
Absolutely. So, no, just you've got to prepare. Don't get stuck thinking that you're never going to make it out because you will, but prepare. And if it's an unsafe place and you're scared, find a safe place to go now. Don't wait. Don't wait because it's not worth it.
thank you, Dawn. Thank you for sharing your story and for helping to uplift, even if that there's just one soul, right? Even if there's just one.
Absolutely.
Um, that's my goal, at least one, and then I'm happy. I'd
Yes.
love more, but at least one. So thank you so much. And you guys, if you have any questions, please know that you can reach out. This will be posted on Texas Desert Rose. And also, Dawn, I will tag you if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
You can message us there, as well as it'll be posted on YouTube as well. Please reach out if you have questions, and please like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dawn. Blessings to you.
Thank you.